You're listening to Parasearch Radio, news, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio. Parasearch Radio, broadcasting to the UK and beyond.
The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Haunted Histories with your host Penny G. Morgan, right here on Parasearch Radio.
And a very warm welcome to another episode of Haunted Histories with me, the self-professed history geek herself, Penny G. Morgan. You may have thought that last week you were hearing things when I appeared not once, but twice on Parasearch Radio. No, it wasn't your imagination playing tricks on you. I was indeed the guest presenter on the Dark Mirror Show last Friday. Kerry and I went into all things Isle of Wight, so if you didn't get a chance to listen to it, please do play it back, as you would have heard lots of history and haunted type stuff that you may have found of interest. Tonight, we're joined by Phil Barron of Haunted Happenings to talk about the inimitable Newsham Park Hospital. This place is probably on the wish list of most paranormal investigators, myself included, so hopefully the show will whet your appetite if it's somewhere that you haven't had a chance to visit just yet. But without further ado, let's get straight into the history bit and start looking into why Newsham Park Orphanage, as it was originally, was so vital. Well, during the 1800s, as you can probably remember from my previous shows on things like the Ragged School and Ripon Workhouse and future shows that will cover the similar sort of things, there was no welfare. So therefore there was no provision for those children who had been orphaned as a result of a seagoing father dying. On December the 16th in 1868, the first move was made to interest the people of Liverpool to the possibility of establishing an institution where the orphan children of seamen would be cared for. The sponsors of the project comprised of a group of ship owners and merchants who, for some time, had been quite concerned how best to help the widows and families of those Merseyside men who had been lost at sea by drowning, or those who had died as a result of an accident or natural causes. The sponsors included many who, despite their own personal calls of business, found time to give their services in helping the less fortunate, those who were sick and the destitute, for whom at the time there was no welfare state to offer help and protection. They felt that this section of the community was really deserving of help, these widows and fatherless children of seamen, and these ship owners and merchants, decided that the time had come and there had to be some definite action. One of the original sponsors, and probably one of the main primary drivers of this, act of benevolence, was ship owner James Beazley. He worked untiringly and without stopping in promoting the need for an institution. On February the 17th, 1869, from his home in Fernhill, Cloughton, Birkenhead, or as I still want to call it whenever I say it, it's Birkenhead. I think I've watched too much Paul O'Grady in my life. He sent a personal letter to the principal ship owners in Liverpool. It read, and this is what the letter had in it. My dear sir, I have always found it well in begging to have an excuse for urging a request. To start the subscription for the proposed Seamen's Orphan Asylum, I am willing to give the sum of £500, providing 9 others will give the same amount each before June the 30th next. This would give £5,000 at once, which I propose should be specially held towards a building fund. And I think if that sum was actually in hand and a suitable advertisement put out to landowners, we should stand a good chance of having a site presented to us. Or we might ask the dock board or the corporation to give us some land. As I particularly wish that my name do not appear before the public as making the foregoing offer, let it be former ship owner. When you have raised the money, then put my name amongst the others. I don't doubt that you will raise the £5,000 if you set to work with the zeal and enthusiasm you possess on the subject. Believe me, yours faithfully, James Beazley. A diarist of the time also wrote that the number of seamen at sea in British merchant vessels in the year 1866 was 196,371. No fewer than 4,866 deaths were recorded during the year, 2,390 of these by drowning alone. Statistics show us that deceased married sailors leave, on average, 3 children, and these, with the widow, are in the great majority of cases almost destitute, and oftentimes absolutely so. Surely it can be a little less than a reproach to this great port that up to the present time no such special orphans' home as the one now in the course of formation has had any existence in our midst. It is but too plain and palpable to us all that the demand for such manifest necessities is far indeed in excess of the supply, and as a consequence thousands, literally thousands, of tender plants are destroyed for lack of knowledge, are physically, morally and religiously degenerating and dying down in our streets. If this be so, and who can gainsay what is here stated, may we not safely assert that no class of men contribute more largely to swell the numbers of the fatherless children and widows in their affliction than our gallant sailors that go down to sea in ships and that do business in great waters? When you think about how much money these men had made for the ship owners, it actually would have been a very, very small outlay in comparison to the gain. But as you also sort of think, there was nothing really there was no profit to be made from doing this for the ship owners. It was genuinely an act of pure benevolence. The institution of Newsham Park Orphanage was formally opened on the 30th of September 1874 by the Duke of Edinburgh, known as the Sailor Prince, who was the 4th son of Queen Victoria. In May 1886, the Queen herself visited the institution and added her name to the list of patrons. In 1899, there were 321 children in this orphanage, whilst 508 were receiving outdoor relief in the form of monetary grants and clothing. Children of all religious denominations were assisted, with preference given to orphans of British seamen connected with the port of Liverpool, and the scholastic and religious instructions were under the supervision of the Church of England chaplain. So, what kind of numbers are we talking about? Was the problem of men being lost at sea, for whatever reason, be it by accident or illness, really that big an issue? Well, let's look at Liverpool in general as a port city. In 1801, the population of Liverpool was around the 77,000 mark, but a mere 20 years later, the population had reached over 118,000. In 1835, the boundaries of Liverpool were extended to include Kirkdale and parts of Toxteth and West Derby. By 1851, so pure 50 years later, the population of Liverpool had increased to 376,000. Bear in mind, if you know your history, there was also many Irish immigrants to Liverpool in the early 19th century. Their numbers reached a peak during the potato famine in the 1840s, which, if you remember listening to some of my early shows when we talked about Kilmainham Jail, that was one of the things we discussed. The port of Liverpool boomed in the 1800s, and many new docks were built. By the middle of the century, Liverpool was second only to London as a port city, and the Manchester Ship Canal was completed in 1894. Although the docks did dominate Liverpool, there were other industries such as shipbuilding, iron foundries, glass manufacture, and soap making. But as a city, it was predominantly a port city. But what was interesting is when I was looking at research for Newsham, I always find actual accounts of what it was like for people to live there. One of the best ways as a historian to learn things. Yes, you do have to be a little bit sort of objective in what you're reading, because it was horrific, might have been horrific compared to what we know now, but for them it might have been quite a pleasant existence. But I did find an excerpt from an interview with a former resident of the orphanage, a lady by the name of Phyllis Gallimore, which I'm going to read to you because I think it's quite interesting. Phyllis says, "I was 5 years old when I went there. The orphanage in Newsham Park was Oliver Twist style, soup every day, and they really weren't fussy about how they punished you. It was quite cruel. Brothers and sisters were segregated. Can you believe it? You would only get to see your siblings for a few hours on a Saturday. Every Wednesday we would be served slink. This was basically all the leftovers from the week. Everything went in that pot. More often than not, it was made up mostly of stringy carrots. The mistress, Sally Seymour I think her name was, used to come and inspect our plates. She'd come round and say, 'You'll eat that.' And if I hadn't eaten it by the time the meal was over, my plate would be represented at tea time with the carrot still on it. If I didn't eat it then, I got sent up to the matron's room where I was made to eat it. I had to think of a way to get out of this, so I hatched a plan. I had a handkerchief, a little bit of linen, and I used to wrap the carrot up in there and put it in my knicker pocket. Then I would go out to the grill in the yard afterwards and drop the carrot down the drain. Anyway, one day when I was doing this, I felt a tap, tap, tap on my shoulder. It was Sally Seymour. She made me bend over, fish the carrots out of the drain, and eat them there and then. I was sick. To this day, I still can't bear carrots. Can't even go near the things. But after 1939, life changed for children in the orphanage. Phyllis carries on. When war broke out, we had to be evacuated. The government approached E.B. Royden. They told him he either had to give his land over to the army or to house us orphans. He chose us. Even orphans made less mess than the army, so off we went to live in Frankby. The war was probably one of the best things that ever happened for us children. It was an absolute relief. All the old harsh masters and mistresses left. We got a whole new era of teachers who cared for us. We got the countryside and a fantastic place to live. It was heaven for us kids. Everything was so much easier. Phyllis herself wasn't actually an orphan in the truest sense of the word. She had lost her mother when her mother had died in childbirth with her giving birth to her younger sister. And because her father was a seaman who was away, she was sent to live in the orphanage and there was no other living relatives to look after her. But why do I keep saying it's so amazing that these ship owners themselves decided that an orphanage like this was necessary and were also prepared to actually fund it themselves for the benefit of the children within it? Well, we need to look a bit of social history here. We need to look at how things were. And whilst the successful ship owners, and remember Liverpool was a slave trading port back in the 1700s as well, you had the mills, the factories. You only have to listen to my show last week on the mills to know the money that was coming in from the textile mills, cotton, wool, etc. And obviously Liverpool, being on a main water source, would have been somewhere where there would have been mills in existence. Well, these merchants, these entrepreneurs, they became ever more wealthy, powerful and comfortable. Those ordinary people of Liverpool who had generated that wealth for them were trapped in their poverty, no way of getting out of it. The rich got richer and the poor got poorer. large, beautiful Georgian townhouses that had been built in the town centre before the great middle-class exodus of said town centre, and the spacious mansions and villas of central Liverpool all had cellars built into them for the domestic servants, the household staff. However, once the merchants and their families had moved out, having sold their former homes to opportunistic, shall we say, landlords, some might say slumlords, as we would know them now, the labouring classes had moved into these buildings, often much more than one family to a room, and they were paying rent for what I would call, and what we would probably all call, extremely poor and frequently overcrowded accommodations. After the upper floors had been filled with new tenants first, the cellars soon filled up too, and these properties, that were formerly quite grand homes, became Liverpool's first slums. The workers, who predominantly laboured on the docks and canal sides and in the factories and workshops, their families and those of the mariners setting sail on frequent, long and uncertain sea voyages around the world, could not afford to leave this grimy, dark, unhealthy heart of this town. It was what they could afford. They were trapped in an increasingly overcrowded urban metropolis, finding themselves eking out their existences in squalor. Indeed, the census of 1789-90 noted that people were living in the cellars of buildings because there was just not enough existing housing to meet demand. The same census reported, and these figures are shocking, that there were 1,728 occupied cellars. Right. A lot of houses, a lot of cellars. But these 1,728 occupied cellars contained 6,788 people, which at that time, and this is shocking, was around 12% of the town's total population. It was around this time, too, that a more notorious form of dwelling was created by private speculators and landlords, the court. These comprised a central square about 20 to 30 feet long by about 10 to 15 feet wide, around which blocks of rooms had been built, often up to 4 floors high. Each block accommodated dozens of families, each one occupying only 1 or 2, perhaps if they were lucky, rooms. At times, there could be more than one family in each room. These court dwellings were accessed by a narrow gate or passageway that, from the outside at least, might have looked like a normal doorway or entrance in the front of a terrace of houses. However, these would lead directly into the courtyard and the self-contained complex of tenemented rooms. Even before the creation of Liverpool's first dock, there was already many of these court dwellings in the town. What this meant for Liverpool was that as Georgian Liverpool became Victorian Liverpool, the population of the town was already a massively divided society, and the barriers between rich and poor were becoming ever broader. As far as the underprivileged of Liverpool were concerned, only 2 things sustained them: a developing possibly of shared suffering, and therefore a kind of community solidarity, which we even see now in some sort of more slum areas, rundown areas, and also a hope and a faith in the afterlife to come. In fact, religious faith was often the only solace for many Liverpudlians at what was soon to be a time of yet more social transformation and upheaval as Britain became increasingly industrialised and class-structured. Which is why this benevolence of the ship owners to provide for these orphans, the orphans of their workers, was so unusual in its time. It was very, very ahead of its time. But the history of Newsham Park didn't finish with it being an orphanage, which it probably wasn't until after the Second World War saw its usage change. Liverpool was quite heavily bombed during the Second World War because of its docks and the factories, and Newsham Park as a building did suffer quite a bit of damage from the bombings. It was the combination of less children going to the orphanage, financial issues, etc., that led to its closing on the 27th of July 1949. 2 years later, it was sold to the Ministry of Health. Now, when we look at history as why would less children be wanting to go there? Well, you've got to think that the welfare state came into existence after the Second World War, so it may have been that families were more agreeable to take in some of these orphans because they would have had some kind of financial recompense for doing so. When we were talking about the properties earlier, if you didn't pay your rent, there was no one else to pay it for you. So if your rent wasn't paid because your husband had died at sea, leaving you with 4 or 5 children, some of these women possibly couldn't cope any longer and could have put their children into the orphanage because they couldn't foresee another way of, achieving shelter for their children. But with the advent of the welfare state, this kind of responsibility changed. Newsham Park Hospital opened its doors in 1954. The hospital itself developed its own psychiatric department and did start to receive an influx of patients with severe mental problems. Remember, I've also said when we were looking at the workhouses that a lot of people who ended up in the workhouses should really have been in some kind of mental health institution. So with the advent of the NHS and the funding of mental health care, there was an awful lot of people flooding in. In 1988, so pretty recently really, the hospital officially stopped taking new patients, and at the end of 1992 all remaining patients and staff were relocated. But it was during 1992 that with the closure of Rainhill Lunatic Asylum, the inmates were moved to Newsham Park Hospital. They took up some 90% of the space, and there was some £1.6 million spent on the hospital so it could house its new patients. It is reported in things that I have read that there are still notices posted on the boards in the school block and paperwork in the property that's dated from 1996 and earlier. We will have to ask Phil later if that's true, or if that is just a myth. So what lies in this building for us to discover? What sort of energies, with such a plethora of energies, perhaps justifying its reputation as the most, or one of the most haunted buildings in Liverpool? What are we going to find when we talk to Phil later? Who knows? Who knows? But if it really was, you had children there who'd lost their parents, you had a hospital, that hospitals do tend to contain energies from the people who lived and died there, who knows what we're going to discover? Well, I think you've listened to me for long enough, so maybe it's time for a quick break. And guess who's come back to say hello again?
Hello, Harry Price here. Good evening. If there's nothing myself and everybody else enjoy here on the other side more is the sit back and relax and listen to Parasearch Radio with its paranormal news, views and reviews from across the UK and beyond. Make sure to find out more about them on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web, whatever they are, to keep up to date with all their broadcasts throughout the week. And I hope you enjoy them as much as we do over here. Hello? Is anybody there?
And we're back for part 2. Thanks for staying with us. I hope you're finding this show on Newsham Park interesting. So, our second half, we're joined by Phil Barron from Haunted Happenings, who is one of the main resident investigators for Haunted Happenings at Newsham Park. Hi, Phil.
Hi, Penny. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
You're more than welcome. You're more than welcome. Now, what you guys probably don't know, because you won't have heard it recorded, Phil and I have been chatting quite a bit, and so you might find a bit of raucous laughter every so often. And I won't tell you what Phil said about Northerners. You know, it's not hard to make them talk. You did
Thanks,
say that. You did say that.
Good.
Yeah, you've never been around too many Londoners once they've started going, have you? So, Phil,
Yeah.
how did you get into the paranormal?
Well, in all fairness, I've sort of been interested in it from a very young age. I always remember reading the Unexplained magazine that was about in the 80s that had got some really unusual, weird stuff in there, and watching sort of stuff like Arthur C. Clarke, and it's always been sort of like there or thereabouts, very intrigued into it. But I guess I've really got into it probably as by accident. My wife's 30th birthday, I decided to go and do something different, and I came across a ghost hunt in the Feathers at Ludlow.
Right.
So I thought, oh, that'd be interesting. So we went and did that, and during the night, some things happened that I couldn't explain. And I thought, well, that's really unusual and really weird. So we decided to book another one, and some other things happened, and something else happened, and then we booked another one. Before you know it, you're hooked. And we were doing ghost hunts like at least a couple of times a month. And that was it. I was in there, you know, I couldn't wait to go on the next one, going around all these great places and investigating and having these really great experiences.
Yeah.
And then I had a bit of a lull when my daughter came along, and then I picked it back up again probably about 2.5 years ago.
Right.
And I happened to be at an event with obviously Haunted Happenings, and Hazel Ford, the owner, was there.
Yeah.
And she said to me, Phil, you know, you need to come to work for us. And it took me about half a second to say yes.
That long?
Well, do you know what? I just couldn't get the words out, and I was so astonished. And then, and that was it. And every weekend now, I'm going up and down the country, going to different events, and I just love it. Absolutely love it. I'm so lucky to do what I do.
Oh, nice. Does your wife still do investigations?
No, she doesn't. She sort of took a bit of a back seat. I mean, she could do it if she wanted to come and do it with us. I mean, but she seems to have not be wrapped in it as much as I am, shall we say. So I'm very lucky that she allows me to go out all these weekends and these dark nights and early mornings doing it. So
She probably enjoys the peace and quiet.
you're probably right there, actually. Yeah, I'm just misguided, I think.
I know that's why my husband lets me do them, because he quite enjoys the fact he gets the bed to himself until 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. So, out of all the places you've investigated over the years, which would you say, or which few would you say have been your favourites?
Gosh, there's so many. I'm so lucky to actually do this. I mean, you go in these places and you get access to all areas. I mean, gosh, they've all got their different draws. I mean, I do like Newsham Park, I've got to say that, and I'm not saying that because we're talking about it. You know, it's a great place, and I'll not say too much because I'm sure we'll talk about it a bit later on. Warwick Castle. Warwick Castle is such a sprawling building.
There's a show coming up on Warwick Castle on... it's in July. I think it's the 12th. I think it could be the 12th of July, something like that. Yeah, we've got a group called Ghost Ventures who do it quite a lot. They're going to be guesting. So yeah, we've got Warwick. You'll have to listen to that one or tell me some of your experiences at Warwick, and I can feature them on the show.
Wow, that sounds great. Galleries of Justice. I mean, how can you not love the Galleries of Justice in Nottingham?
Yeah, that's the one in Nottingham. I've never been there, although I've heard very good things about it.
And then, funnily enough, East 30 East Drive, the Poltergeist house. That's a very unusual one. And I just, you know, I don't know, you just get drawn to it. It's a very weird place, as they all are, but, you know, I just love going there.
Yeah, I've talked to people about East Drive, 30 East Drive before, and we just wonder if sometimes when people go, they say absolutely nothing happens. It's as dead as you can be, if you pardon the pun. But then other times they go, it's almost like it needs to recharge if you go there too often. I just wonder if places like that, De Grey Street, those kind of ones, because if they've been overfished a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've been very lucky. I've been there quite a few times, and yeah, we've had nights where it's been really quiet or very subtle. We've had nights where it's been off the scale. You can never really judge it. You're right. Sometimes you think it's because people's been there a lot, or is it all to do with energy, or I don't know. But that's the realism of it, I guess, that you just never know what you're going to get. But you do right. I don't know. Sometimes it's really subtle. Sometimes it's really busy. Sometimes it's just mediocre. But that's the fun of it.
Yeah, you never know what you're going to get.
No, absolutely not. No.
So, are there any places then that have ever given you the sort of the heebie-jeebies that you've almost had to steel yourself to go back in again or to carry on an investigation?
Well, there is two that are quite recent. One of them, funny enough, is East Drive. I actually arrived at East Drive about 3 or 4 weeks ago to be sort of met there by Carol, who lives next door, sort of manages the place for Bill Bungay, who owns it. Right. And she was stood staring at the building, and I said, "You're all right, Carol," because she gives us the key to let us in. And all the windows were open upstairs. And we thought, all right, okay. So we then stood looking at the house, and we saw a shadow. We both saw it walk past the kitchen window. We thought, somebody broke in, somebody in there. So right or wrong, we went in, opened the door, shouting hello, what have you. And to cut a very long story short, we walked into the building, into the house, nothing, couldn't hear anything, went upstairs, and there was nobody in the house. Now, I can't explain what I saw or what went past the window. There was definitely some shadow or figure walked past the kitchen window. All the windows were upstairs, and Carol tells me faithfully. Now, that night, Hazel had asked me to do a Facebook Live through the official Haunted Happenings website, and I actually came back out and sat in the car for 20 minutes thinking, I can't do that. I can't go in there because I was on my own, and right. There was lockdown things, and that really put me about thinking. I mean, I did, I did the professional bit, and I went back in and I did it. I started with the lights on, obviously, and then we were pretty desperate, but that really put me about. And I think also Newsham Park. Again, probably about 3 or 4 months ago, at the end of the night, I thought I'd left a piece of equipment down in the laundry area. There's a room right at the end of the laundry corridor called the locker room.
Right.
And I went down there thinking I'd left my piece of equipment, and I got there and it wasn't there. And that's not paranormal. I just literally hadn't left it there. But then I had a minute of realization, thinking, what am I doing? And I walked very quickly back upstairs again. And as I got to the top of the stairs and I stopped, I heard a couple of extra footsteps behind me. And then I ran the last little bit back to the base room. So, I think people do think that because we do this every weekend that we're immune to it. We get just as excited, just as apprehensive, and sometimes just as scared. So, yeah. But that's what draws you to it. So, yeah, there has been a few moments, and I think we could all probably tell you a few stories, I guess.
I haven't been scared yet.
Really? Okay.
No. It's there's the only time I've been a little bit. I wasn't scared. It was more like, oh God, where is this going to go? It actually involved real living people on an investigation. When I was at Drakelow Tunnels, which is brilliant if you've never been there.
It is.
So interesting as well. And this gentleman who was in our group started to kick off because we wouldn't let him put his meters and things near a guy who was in quite a unpredictable trance.
All right,
and he got quite angry with us, and he was like hurling abuse at us and everything else. And that's the only time I've been unnerved. But it wasn't because of the sort of the paranormal stuff. It was the fact that I didn't know what he was going to do next. And but yeah, I have not been scared yet. There are times when I've sort of jumped and gone, oh, what was that? Didn't expect that. But I wasn't scared. It was no different if somebody came up behind me and clapped their hands behind my head. I'd jump. But I'm waiting to be... There's a challenge for anyone listening. I am waiting for an investigation to actually unnerve me and for me to sort of almost not want to go back in. But so far, it sounds very arrogant to say it, but so far it's not happened.
Well, the gauntlet's down then. Somebody needs to...
It is.
Get going.
I've probably irritated other investigators when they've gone, oh, you scared? No. And it's not that I'm a skeptic or anything, because I'm not. I'm very far from it. But, I think maybe I need to do a lone vigil or something somewhere and see if that works. But, I want to be frightened. I want something to actually unnerve me to the point where I'm like, what am I doing here? But, yeah, that's the only time I've been slightly intimidated, and that was because I just genuinely didn't know what this bloke was going to do next. But as my husband's quite scared of the whole idea of doing an investigation, and as I've said to him, the dead don't bother me, it's the living that do.
Yeah. I must admit, even now, guests every now and again will jump out on you, thinking it's quite funny. And it's quite a jokey thing, but you think, really? That's not what we're here for, sort of thing. But we have a laugh and a joke while we're at it. But, yeah, they scare you more than the ghosts, I think, sometimes.
Yeah. No, it was this guy was losing his temper. And that's when I get a bit unnerved about people, because you just genuinely don't know what they're going to do next.
No, that's right.
But he got asked to leave, so it all got sorted in the end. But it was a bit of a... Yeah. So if you had a dream wish list of places you'd like to investigate, where would they be?
Wow, goodness me. There's quite a few, in all fairness. I mean, the Tower of London. I mean, who would not want to go to the
Did
Tower
a
of
show
London?
on that. That was my first show. No, second
Really?
show. Yeah, second show.
Anybody think that we've been talking or something, Penny?
You'd think, wouldn't you? And I don't think I have given you the itinerary of shows I've done.
But I mean, the history that's walked through those corridors, and wow, that would be an amazing place. I don't think they'd ever open it up to the public, but hey, you never say never.
Won't. You can't get into anything that's part of the royal palaces. I actually inquired to find out if any with someone I know someone whose brother's a beef one of the beef eaters.
Right.
He's actually, I think he's the head warden now, or yeoman warden, whatever they're called. And he said, no, you'd never get allowed. They won't open up any of the royal palaces for investigations, sadly. So, but yeah, the Tower of London's a fascinating place and full of a lot of misconceptions from a history perspective, what people think actually occurred there. But yeah, I can understand that one.
There's also the Plague Island in Venice. I wasn't going to give it its right. Was it Poveglia?
Poveglia, yeah. Yes.
Because of the abandonment space of it and what it was and what they did.
And the fact it's surrounded by water, therefore, in theory, the spirits can't escape.
Yeah.
Yes, that's probably is penciled in as a future show because there is a couple of ghost groups in the UK actually going out there.
Wow.
And obviously, Ghost Adventures did quite a good show on it as well. So yeah, that would be on my wish list as well.
And I think the other probably Alcatraz for various reasons. It's obviously again loads of history, loads of different types of people that's been there. So it's not like a hospital where you've just had loads of patients, or where there's been like Parliament where there's just been like kings and queens and things. These guys have been murderers, killers, people that were hanged wrongly, and I'd just love to go. I really would love to go.
Have you ever been as a punter?
My wife has, but I haven't had that privilege.
I have. Seriously, it sounds like I'm just trying to rain on your parade everywhere you're mentioning. No, I have genuinely been to Alcatraz. When I was talking to Anita last week on our show, she mentioned Alcatraz is one that she'd like to do. And I've been. It was during the daytime on a proper museum sort of trip. Yeah. I actually quite liked the place. I didn't find it that intimidating at all. Maybe it's different after dark. But the weirdest thing that happened to me, and I mentioned this last week, is in the rec area, the recreation area, there's all those stone steps up the side that you could use as seats. And the friend who I was staying with took a photo of me sitting on one of these steps, and I was kind of had my legs crossed with my head sort of chin resting on my hand. And I was actually staring out on the bay, thinking how peaceful it was. And wondering, was it really such a bad deal to be there? The views were amazing, and you had this amazing view of San Francisco and all the roads coming down to the sort of seafront. And so he took this photo of me. I didn't know he was taking it, but when we got them developed, we were looking at some photos of Al Capone, and there is an identical photo of Al Capone sitting in exactly the same place, exactly the same pose, looking out on the bay.
Wow.
I didn't know. Because I didn't know he was taking the photo of me. So that was a bit sort of...
That's very coincidental, isn't it, really? I mean, people could say that. And let's just say, that's a possibility. But, yeah, that's quite unusual.
Yeah. I was just... Because I tend to sort of, drift off when I'm in places. Not daydream so much, but sort of think what it would have been like and try and picture it and picture the noises they would have been listening to and all that kind of geeky history stuff. And I say I didn't even know my friend was taking this photo. I didn't know he'd taken it until I got them developed, and we were looking at this sort of guidebook he'd bought on Alcatraz, and it was like, that's a bit weird, and it was pretty identical. So, yeah, it's a fascinating place, but I wish there was just too many people there. I'd probably want to go in the winter when not many people would want to make the crossing, when it was quiet. But it's fascinating, and the older history of it is even more interesting, sort of the underground, the caves, and the old jail cells that, if you watch the films, were reported to have been used for the segregation cells and all of that. But there was an old guard there. He was one of the few remaining guards from when it was a prison, and I asked him if those cells really existed. He got quite angry with me and said, I don't believe everything you hear. Okay. Me thinking I protesteth too much. But... trying
to smudge that over so you don't ask too many questions, or.
Yeah, But yeah, that one would be a very interesting one. But I don't even know if they run normal investigations at Alcatraz, or if it's only if you're a television program. But
Yeah,
it would be a good one. It would be
it
a
would.
good one.
But I mean, any of those would be great.
Mm.
Never know.
Yeah, I think Pavelia is probably your most likely one.
I think you're probably right.
You need to have a word with Hazel.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think when I come off, I need to speak to Hazel about it, and probably a couple of other things at other places.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's good. It'd be a great idea.
What, Pavelia?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I might sort of have to sell a kidney to go on that one. That would be quite. I'm sure I could find someone who'd buy it. It's reasonably well, not too battered. I suppose we should talk about Newsham, really, shouldn't we?
Yeah.
You've been there quite a lot, and in fact, your claim to fame, probably, Phil, is the photo that was, well, it actually went into the national press in the end after, I think it was Liverpool Echo featured.
Yeah.
Is that right?
It was in the national press last year, and then it sort of came back round again, like I said, through the Liverpool Echo, and then into the national press again for the second time, which was quite. I don't know what the right word is. I'm not a big sort of like limelight person. I was quite taken aback by it, if I'm absolutely honest. But yeah, a very interesting picture. It was, I guess, obviously taken on Halloween last year,
right?
Funny, which is a great day. What we do when we do the investigations, we do a bit of intro with all the guests, obviously, to put everybody at ease and tell them how the night's going to progress and what we're going to be doing. And then we always take a photograph of the whole group, a bit of a posterity thing, and it goes up on the official Haunted Happenings Facebook page. People can take themselves in and do comments, and we do it every single event that we go to. And that night was no other. We did the intros, I took the picture, took 3 pictures, and I put the phone away, as we always do, get on with the investigation, and the night went smoothly. And then sort of when we have a break mid sort of like night, sent the picture into the office for them to upload the next morning, and that was it. Did the rest of the night, had a great night. Woke up the next morning around 7ish to my phone pinging away, going crazy, and then they were all talking about this picture. It's like, wow, okay, it's a very interesting picture, Penny, as I'm sure you know because you've seen it.
Yeah. So have you had anyone sort of test it from a sort of a technological point of view to check it is genuine?
There's been quite a few people that's obviously made comments about, it's been photoshopped, or look at this and that. I mean, I can honestly say I personally took the picture. The only thing I did to it is I lighted it slightly on my phone because it was a little bit dark, because Newsham's a very dark place, not like all that sort of, and then sent it off, and that was it. And we've not done anything else with it. And it literally got posted up there, and what you see is exactly what was taken. And we have had a few people that stepped forward and said it was them, or they know who it is. And I think Hazel and the office have said, that's great, we just need to evidence it. Because the first thing we always want to do, as you know, we want to debunk it. Yeah. We're not saying ghost, we're just saying it's an interesting picture. We'd love it to be a ghost, but let's try and debunk it, which is where we're still at, believe it or not, all these months later. But as of yet, nobody's been able to come back with the evidence saying, there you go, it was me, here's my ticket, or here's my pic, something like that. So at the minute, it's still out there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
There's no sort of mediums or sort of clairvoyants who've come forward with any idea as to who it might be. Not that I'm aware of at the moment.
Okay. Mainly Hazel and the guys in the office, obviously, that they would interact with people more than I would.
Yeah.
But I know Hazel did say some people had come forward to say that it was them, or that it was somebody that they knew. So I'm thinking, well, my take on it, if it's somebody that they knew, is it somebody that was on the event during the night? Is it somebody that has passed over? There's various permutations, I guess, but as of yet, we've not been able to evidence any of it. So
the thing is, looking at it, it looks a bit too transparent to be an actual person, like a living, breathing, flesh. It doesn't look looking at the figure next to the people it's next to. If you get my drift, it looks a different kind of consistency. Anyway,
it does.
So.
How we set it up as well, we set it where we have like two lines of people. As you can see, there's a line at the back and people that are a bit more vertically challenged at the front, sort of thing. And it's just not, it doesn't sit right either. But no. I don't know, it just looks unusual, and I can't answer the question at the minute. I really can't. But it just doesn't look right. It doesn't sit right.
No, it doesn't. That's why it almost looks like it's a photo overlaying a photo. But it's very hard to do that on a mobile phone without gadgetry. So. It's a very interesting one. It was a very interesting one, and I must admit, when I saw that article, didn't know that 6 months later I'd be talking to the man himself. I must admit.
Bless you. Well, I must admit, like I said, I mean, I'm not a big sort of like limelight person, and when it went out there, it was like, the Nationals were putting it in the paper, it went out in Hong Kong and all, and it was just crazy. And like I say, it's gone round again through the Liverpool Echo and the Daily Star and whatever. So it's good that it's still out there, because obviously people can still see it, and there's still an opportunity for people to debunk it
and question it, like you say. Yeah, because I think that's one of the fallacies people don't realise about paranormal investigators. We're investigators. We're not. We believe there's a potential, but we don't necessarily believe that every single experience is something from beyond. And I think there's this whole sort of like, you hear a bang and somebody says, but you think that's something paranormal, and it's like, well, no, it's probably something falling off the shelf upstairs because the window's open, and therefore, you don't. And I do think that's a big misconception for people who are not into it, that they think everyone who does this believes everything unequivocally, rather than we do try and debunk all potential possibilities first before we're left with well, I can't explain it, therefore. But it is an interesting photo. I have looked at it. I've enlarged it on my computer to look at it, and it doesn't, like you say, it doesn't sit right. It's not. If it is a human who's snuck onto the door, they probably need to see a doctor because they didn't look well.
No, I think you're right. That's it. I mean, it's the complexion as well. Doesn't look right. Yeah. I think a few people have said, it's the light, but look at everybody else in the picture.
If it was the light, other people would have been like the person in front or the person to one side. No, it's a hard one to explain.
It is.
So, tell us a bit about some of your experiences at Newsham. Some of the ones that really stick in your mind.
Well, I mean, Newsham, where do I start? I mean, it's got various rooms. I'm sure a lot of people know. I mean, it's got a laundry, it's got a mortuary, it's got various wings, it's got a naughty boys corridor, it's got a theatre, it's got a kitchen area. It's a huge sprawling building. Yeah. I mean, we've had, like I said, you can be walking around and you think there's somebody behind you, and you can stop, and you might hear a couple of extra footsteps behind you, and you're like, there's definitely nobody behind me. So is it an echo? Is it my feet? Is it somebody else? We've had things thrown at us while we've been walking on. We always do what we call a health and safety walk around before the guests arrive, just to make sure everything's well. The number of times we've walked around that building and things have been thrown at us, or we've had like stones thrown around, or you've heard like sort of banging around in the areas that we're not actually in there. We've also had like doors opening. We've had on the Naughty Boys corridor. For those people that's not experienced it yet, there's a corridor in there that supposedly is where they used to put the children in some little tiny rooms, and they would put them in there for hours and hours as a punishment. Now up there, there's supposedly some children up there that still obviously roaming the place. The doors have opened. Yeah. We've had the doors open in front of us. We've had the doors shut in front of us. We've heard like voices coming out of areas where it's not possible for the outside sort of world to be able to make those noises, and there's nobody in there. We've had equipment just literally going off, and that's a bit of a difficult one, because equipment's like, well, that could just go off, it could be just an anomaly. But when you've got things like we use Alice boxes, and Alice boxes, I don't know, I'm still out, the jury's out on that one if I'm honest, but some of the things that I've had come out of there, the words are, so descriptive and fit exactly where they are. Yeah. We've had words that's come out of there like janitor and locker and ward and crazy things like that. So, but every time you go, there's something different. I mean, we've had guests that's had pictures of faces they've got doors obviously on the walls with little bits of glass in them, and you can see the faces in them. And we've had, I was there 3 or 4 weeks ago, and we had a group of 8 guests, and we split them into 2 on the corridor. And next thing I heard a bit of a shout, and we were running down there, and they were adamant that they'd seen an apparition, of a woman in like a white smock with short sleeves, like they would wear when it was a hospital, with a hairy bun. And 3 out of the 4 girls saw that. The amount of things that's reported there, it's just up to, and obviously we use the day-to-day experiments like the Ouija boards, and we use table tipping and glass work, and some of the things that's come out of there that it's so difficult to explain to people about, like table tipping, when tables are rocking and spinning on one legs, and they look at you gone out. But it's just such a great place, and more often than not, people forget that it's all about gadgets. People think, it's a gadget. You're the best bit of equipment. The way you feel, where you sit and walking around that place, you can walk in one area and feel one thing, walk in a second area. It's just a great building, and every time we go, there's something different there. Really is. It's a great place. I love it.
So would you say the resident energies, for want of a better term, are more likely to be the children from when it was an orphanage, or would you say there's an awful lot of people from... Because obviously it was a normal hospital, and then it became pretty much like 90% of it was used as a mental health type asylum. Which would you say has the strongest resonance from the experiments and the sort of findings that you've had?
It's almost as if they're split onto different levels. Right. So we got onto the third level, onto level 3, where the Naughty Boys corridor, and you get the typical children, and also sort of a headmaster type entity that's up there. And then you come down onto the wards, which is on like a G. It's called G wing, which is on the ground floor, and then you come across patients and doctors and nurses and matrons. And then you'll go down into the laundry area, which is like it's like one level down, but it feels like you're going below ground, but you're not, because you've already gone up to get in the building. And down there, you got people that's like busying about, that were like cleaning and washing the sheets and the linen and the clothes. It's really weird, because it's almost as if it's been sectioned off differently. So you go in one area, and they don't seem to mix. But it's just so unusual place. It really is.
So. I mean, one of the things that when I was reading up on it, it said that there's still paperwork and notices, etc., from 1996, when it was pretty much completely shut down. Is that true? Are those kind of artefacts still there?
They were there. I saw them quite a few months ago. In the kitchen area, we came across some look like paperwork requests for different kinds of food, and they were dated 1996. Right. But as the weeks and months have gone on, there seem to be less and less of those sort of things that you find around there. So
maybe people have taken them home as souvenirs.
I hope not, but who knows?
Well, I'll tell you something. If anyone's listening who thinks it's okay to take stuff home when you're doing a paranormal investigation, no. Because if there is something attaching to that, it's coming home with you. So, leave things where they are for anyone else coming to investigate a place. That's all I'd like to say. So we'll hope that they've just been moved for whatever reason, but just in case they've found their way into someone's pocket, please don't do that when you're on an investigation. Would you agree there, Phil?
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of the things that we instill into everybody that comes on our investigation is respect for three things. Respect each other's beliefs, respect the spirit, and respect the building within. Yeah. Absolutely.
I agree. I think there's been too many tales recently of paranormal investigations actually causing damage to the buildings that they've gone in, because even though there's only a few of them that have done it, it's actually given the rest of us a bad name, and it's making it 10 times harder for other people to do it, because, you're not going to loan things to people if you know they're going to come back broken or missing. So... Which part of Newsham do you find the easiest to be in, and which part do you find a bit kind of, it could go either way?
Okay, I think the easiest would probably be the Naughty Boys corridor. We always laugh. Yeah, when we go up on the Naughty Boys corridor.
That tells me something about you, Phil.
Is it the weekend yet? It's always really warm up there. We always laugh about it. It's not paranormal. It's the only place in the whole building, regardless of what time of year it is. It's quite warm. It's right at the top of the building. The insulation must be great. Yeah. But it's got like quite a friendly atmosphere. Don't get me wrong, it can change on a pin when it wants, but it's quite a friendly and active atmosphere, and I quite like it up there. I mean, some of the other guys and the other hosts and the team, I'm sure, would have different opinions, but that's my personal opinion. And I guess the one that I feel about is probably the laundry area.
Right.
Down in the laundry, there's a long corridor with 3 rooms going off it, and right down at the bottom there's something called the locker room, which is where all the people that actually worked at the hospital stored their personal belongings.
Right.
And I always feel a bit uneasy in there. I can't tell you why. Nothing specific has happened to me. Like I said, I've heard a few, obviously, footsteps when I've stopped, and I've heard some knocks. It goes back to how I said, you're the best bit of equipment. The way you feel, the uneasiness, and that, for me, is a place there that I feel a bit uneasy with. But having said that, when I get the opportunity to go, where do you want to work, you jump at it, don't you? Because that's what we do. That's what we do. But, yeah, I'd say the laundry area.
Oh, interesting. And I know you were on Talk Radio recently, talking about Newsham.
They asked me to go literally because the picture came back out again to do the rounds, and they asked if I'd just come on and just have a bit of a talk about Newsham and the picture and what have you. So yeah, that was probably about 3 weeks ago, something like that. Yeah.
And can people still listen into it? Because obviously you can listen into our shows for as long as you want, because they're stored indefinitely as podcasts and downloads. So do you know if the Talk Radio one's the same?
I have been on there myself. I don't know if that's Sadness or Vain. I'm not really sure which one it is. But
you Google yourself, don't you, Phil? Come on, be honest.
No, you wouldn't want to Google me, trust me. They've got another listen again. How long it stays on there for, I don't know. But there seem to be quite a few months on there. So yeah, you can go on the Talk Radio and listen again.
Oh, interesting. Absolutely. So what's Haunted Happenings got coming up? What have you got coming up that you want to chat about? We've got...
Every single weekend we are somewhere in the country. We do up and down the country, all the way from Scotland all the way down to the Cornwall. We're somewhere every single weekend. The best thing to do, if anybody wants to actually come and experience something like that, just jump on the website, www.hauntedhappenings.co.uk. If you go on there, it's a really friendly and easy way to use the website. You can do a drop-down box and it'll tell you every single place we can go to. We do, obviously, tours. UK tours. We've got Village of the Damned coming up in the next couple of weeks. There's also more dates during the year for in Eyam, and we've also got some European tours. We've just done, unfortunately I wasn't able to go because of the commitments, but Hazel and the team went and did a bit of a recce at Hoiabaca in Romania, the Haunted Forest.
Yes, I spoke to her about that. She's very excited about taking clients there. Yeah.
So we've got, all sorts going off. You really, it's so difficult for me. I mean, we're back at Newsham this weekend. We're at East Drive. We're up and down the country. We're absolutely everywhere. So just jump on the website. That's the best thing to do.
And the Facebook page as well, isn't there? Haunted Happenings Facebook. Yeah.
Absolutely. Official Haunted Happenings Facebook page. You can jump on there. And if you're stuck with anything, just give the office a call. They're really, really nice people.
They're lovely. They are lovely. Yeah.
I can assure you, you'd have a great night. We'd have lots of fun. It's not all just like straight-laced strict things. We do have a structure, as you'd need to have, and we do have some fun as well, and we do some investigating. But, if you really want to give it a go, if you want to be the investigator, like you sit and watch all these television programmes, come and have a go. Seriously, you wouldn't regret it. Absolutely.
Brilliant. Well, that's our half an hour up, believe it or not.
Wow.
It's been a real pleasure chatting to you, Phil. I really enjoyed it. I promise I will come up to Newsham at some point. I do want to investigate it. It's on one of my sort of top 10 places in the UK that I want to get to at some point. But it's, as you can imagine, it's getting around the country to see all these amazing places. But I will be coming up to Newsham at some point, and we'll probably do a follow-up show on the place after that, if you'd be happy to come back and chat to us again.
More than happy. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It wasn't been painful or anything then.
Absolutely. I like the sound of my own voice. Have you not realised that yet, Penny? You've been more than welcome. We'd love to have you, and it would be an absolute pleasure. It really would.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, my thanks going into Phil and to Haunted Happenings for being our guests on this week's show on Newsham Park. Don't forget, you can listen to all of our previous shows if you go onto our website and through the Spreaker page that we have. We've shows on every night of the week on a variety of subjects, so do tune in. But all that leaves me to say is thank you so much for listening. Goodbye, sleep tight, and don't get too worried about things that go bump in the night.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.